Hello, my monstrosities. Hello once again. Today I bring to you Grotmas Day 4's Thousand Suns Detachment. Now, I'm probably doing what I did for the other ones that weren't Tyranids and releasing this the day after because I wanted to let some things settle, and well, that's what I like doing, letting some things settle to gain some more insight to see at least where GW was trying to go with things. If you're watching this video, you've probably already seen by now everybody's opinion on it. And I think I'm not typically trying to be an optimist, which is an odd thing to say. I guess I should try to be an optimist, huh? But it's not always what it seems. And isn't that perfect for zines? So today it is the Hexwarp Thrallband. I'm not gonna read through this because it's not not my army. Only my armies get that love. But for the Hexwarp Thrallband, I have I have good and bad news. Um, well, possibly good or bad news. This gives you deployment zone is always within your army's flow of magic. No Man's Land flow of magic. It's power matrix from Necron, Synoptic Court. It is demons, um, land of shadow or whatever the fuck it's called. Um, that's that. When each time a Thousand Suns model from your army makes a psychic attack, reroll a wound roll of 1. If such a model is wholly within your army's flow of magic, each time it makes a psychic attack, add 1 to the wound roll instead. Now, when I first read this, I was like, oh, that's cool. Thousand Suns is flowing with psychic attacks. And you all aren't. To the extent that I thought. You have more than most people. Do you have more than Tyranids? We might have. Nah, you definitely have more. But, it was interesting to see the lack of things that have psychic attacks. And then those psychic attacks either being reroll wounds of 1 or add 1 to the wound roll instead. Into which, well, it plays against itself, but not at the same time. This is really, to capitalize on this so far, you do have to kind of fluctuate, like they really took Zinx to the max, uh, to make use of this. Will you want to do that? Probably not. We all know that Cult of Magic, that's the that's the one, right? Yeah, Cult of Magic is actually just straight up better, but I do have a reason, few reasons actually, you might play this as opposed to Cult of Magic. But we'll get to that after we run down everything. Enhancements, Arcane Might, 20 points. Thousand Suns model only. Add 1 to the strength characteristic of psychic weapons equipped by models in the bear's unit. While the bear's unit is wholly within your army's flow of magic, add 2 to the strength characteristic of psychic weapons equipped by models in that unit instead. 20 points. Decent damage boost for certain units. Empowered Manifestation, 20 points. Thousand Suns model only. While the bearer's unit is wholly within your army's flow of magic, add 6 inches to the range of psychic abilities the bearer has that specify a range, including rituals, and each time a model in the bearer's unit takes a hazardous test for a psychic weapon, you can reroll the result. Okay, 20 points. Okay. Empiric Onslaught. Thousand Suns model only. While the bearer's unit is wholly within your army's flow of magic, add 3 to the attached characteristic of ranged psychic weapons equipped by the bearer. 25 points. That's pretty cool, if you ask me. Now, well, it is tricky that you have to be within your army's flow of magic. But we'll get on to why that's probably more possible and why this detachment I can see it winning some things. Like unexpectedly, if you lean into it, you can probably win some things. Noctilith Mantle, 15 points. 1000 Suns model only. While the bearer's unit is on the battlefield, it is wholly within your army's flow of magic. Models in that unit cannot be selected to use any rituals. I first read this and I went, why the hell would I want that? I have +1 to wound, no rituals. I'm going to spoil something coming up, but what if this was on, you had a point, first off, it's a 15 pointer, so it's probably a points filler. Don't go with this in mind. Second off, what if you put this on a unit that you almost never use rituals on? And that's the big hint. Then we go down, if this lets me, to the stratagems. Calm down now. Warden Hex, command phase, 1000 Sun Psyker from your unit, 1000 Sun Psyker unit from your army within range of an objective marker, sticky. Now, sticky is good overall. Sticky is interesting when your army isn't very good at holding control. To which I'm going to give another hint. You don't want to play your usual list. And that's what all of the Grotmist detachments are. Or have been so far, really. You don't want to play the shit you've been playing. You want to play shit that is not what you've been playing. So, I admit I'm not ecstatic about the Tyranids detachment that released yesterday, but that's because you can do all of that and nobody listened to me. More than anything, right? And you'll find that a lot of these, you can, quote unquote, do all of these things, but the Grotmist detachments are giving you reason to do these things more than you doing them in the better detachment. And after the Dark Angels detachment that came out, the Lion's Blade Task Force, and my review of that, I think it is becoming apparent that sometimes bringing the non-optimal units for these non-optimal detachments might be an optimal game plan for some circumstances. And it's also important to remember that not everything has to be a GT buster, a golden ticket winner, right? Some of this is just for what my channel aims to do, into which you are taking your toys off of the shelf for one hurrah. And that's what this is going to do. You go to Through the Veil, start of the reinforcement step of your movement phase. One Rubric Marines, or Scarab Occult Terminators unit from your army that is in strategic reserves. If it is a Rubric Marines unit, until the end of the phase, it has the Deep Strike ability. When your unit is set up on the battlefield using Deep Strike, if you are within the flow of magic, you can do it from 6 inches instead of 9. If a Rubric Occult Terminators unit is targeted with their stratagem, it is not eligible to declare a charge in the same turn. Cool. Wrath of the Doomed. Fight phase. Just after an enemy unit has selected its targets, 1000 Suns unit from your army that was selected as the target of one or more attacking units' attacks, you get a fight on death, adding 1 to the result if your unit is wholly within your army's flow of magic. So, on 3s, within the flow, outside of the flow, on 4s, fight on death. Now, another hint, usually, 1000 Suns do not want to be in the fight phase, in combat, I should say. And that's your other hint before I unveil my master plan, the grand plan, the rate plan. What the fuck is it? 1000 Sun players in the comments, tell me. What is it? The master plan? What's Zinch's great plan? Either way, scoring Warp Flame. Your shooting phase. 1000 Sun Psyker unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot this phase and is wholly within your army's flow of magic. Until the end of the phase, ranged weapons equipped by models in your unit have the ignores cover and they strip cover. We saw this yesterday in the Tyranids detachment. And this this is twofold, right? Thousand Suns have a lot of things that ignores cover. But every now and again, they have things that don't do that. And if you can prime that for 1 CP, maybe a CP that you don't mind spending, because you'll get it back, you, yeah, maybe. Now, I will say, I'm recording this before I make the thumbnails and the titles, that's how I operate. So, I've probably already given away the master plan in hindsight, but yeah, some of your shit doesn't have ignores cover, and could appreciate +1 to wound, and will help you the rest of your army. Strange of Time. Your movement phase, just after a 1,000 Sun Psyker unit from your army falls back. That 1,000 Sun Psyker unit, until the end of the turn, your unit is eligible to shoot or declare a charge in a turn in which it fell back. If your unit is wholly within your army's flow of magic when it is targeted with this stratagem, then until the end of the turn, your unit is eligible to shoot and declare a charge in a turn in which it fell back. Extra steps for shit that most other people have just as a strat. Or at least factions, not necessarily detachment wise, but it's okay. Again, for who it's going to go on. Kaleidoscopic Tempest. That's something. Your opponent's shooting phase, just after an enemy unit has selected its target. 1,000 Sun Psyker unit from your army that was selected as the target of one or more attacks. Until the end of the phase, your unit has stealth, and if it is wholly within your army's flow of magic, benefit of cover as well. That's fine. 1 CP. Not going to cry over it. Well, I was going to cry over it regardless. I'm not a Thousand Suns player. Now, let's get into... Let's zone this out, right? Let's get that back to non-geriatric reading. Each time a Thousand Suns model from your army makes a psychic attack, reroll a wound roll 1, or add 1 to the wound roll. Now, reading that and then going through all the units, I was like, well, both the Ahrimans and Magnus give you +1 to wound. Boop and boop. And that gives you the next clue or possible clue. When you have access to the core rule already, it is saying, hey, this is design theory, I guess. Not necessarily to say that this is by law or anything, but balance theory, design theory, yada yada yada. If you have access to something, you no longer need to bring the thing that gave you access to it if you have it in a different way. Can we agree on that? If I have +1 to wound, I typically don't need to bring something that gives me +1 to wound because they don't stack, right? So, if I have Magnus or Ahriman, I don't need to play Hexwarp Thrallband. I could go play Cult of Magic. If I would like to free up 465 points, plus another 150, plus whatever the fuck rubric squad you do, probably the MSU because you want more points, right? I go to the thing that can give me +1 to wound. Now on the flip side, if I still really like Magnus, who can give me +1 to hit, +1 to wound, or Ahriman that can give me +1 to wound, who leads, hint hint, battle line, I have a reroll of wounds option. Rerolling wounds +1 to wound is good. So ultimately, this cancels each other out by making it an instead versus and to which they're saying, I don't want to tell people that they bought Magnus for nothing. I don't want to tell people they bought Ahriman for nothing. And then Rubric Marines have rerolls, wound rolls of 1. And they are, hint hint, battle line. So, they also have, full reroll of wounds if it's an objective marker you don't control, yada yada yada, right? So there's your other, well, if I'm +1 to wound, and I get re-roll wounds, I might not need to bring Ahriman in general for this detachment. If you want to put him solo dolo for 150 points, maybe, but outside of that, you're looking to attach the Rubric Marines to other shit in this detachment. Whoopsie. There we go. Magnus the Red, it is whatever you want because he has a 14-inch move. You have access to a ritual to move like just absurd amounts, right? So you can do that with Magnus to get into either the zone that you want or not the zone, I guess, technically. So you could either be in your zone or out your zone. And this gives Magnus the freedom to roam about the fucking board wherever he so pleases. If you have your home deployment zone as your flow of magic, you are already getting +1 to wound with your psychic attacks, right? And don't worry, we will get to the psychic attack part again. +1 to wound, Magnus doesn't need to be there. So that means you can start taking the middle of the board with Magnus very quickly. Especially when he has Deep Strike, Fly, 14 inches. You can just leave as quickly as you want. He doesn't necessarily need to start on the board. You probably still want to, but I'm just saying, right? So then, after you take the midfield, which you go, but Monster, you've highlighted Thousand Suns aren't great at that. How am I going to do that? We'll get to that later. But for now, if you finally take the midfield, you can then put Magnus into your opponent's backfield and just beat their ass with Magnus. Magnus beats ass. Okay? So, this is you can free up 465 points because you're going to get +1 to wound anyway, somehow, some way. Or, if you love your Magnus, because we all know he did nothing wrong, you can let him roam about the cabin and hit whoever the fuck he wants and kind of use him as a... Ooh, what's a good one? I don't want to say as a bomb, but as a... just a menace, right? A wrecking crew, I guess. You just let him go do shit as opposed to being the focal part where you let things build around him. Because usually he goes into the midfield, stays there, because he has this aura that he is going to give out to other people. Right? However, if your other people do shit like Deep Strike, and they Deep Strike next to Magnus, after Magnus has cleared the way to get into your opponent's home field or something like that, it gets a lot more nasty. So that's my theory on the application of Magnus in this detachment. Then we go further, going to close out RMN because we don't need to talk about him anymore. And why did I keep going hint hint battle line? Well, the detachment that was before this, i.e. my Tyrannus detachment, gave me more battle line. And what is a key thing about battle line? Increased objective control. So, if you have objective control, you can control objectives. And when you control objectives, you can expand your flow of magic. Now, that's where you go into a lot of this shenaniganizing. That is step one of the shenaniganizing with this process. And I will say, at this point, I know I probably sound like devil's advocate for why you would use this. I just don't want people... I want people to realize what I believe to be the intent here. I'm not going to tell you to play this over Cult of Magic. Probably never going to do that. But I can actively see reasons why, and depending on metas, I can see how this becomes more annoying to some armies than Cult of Magic. Like, for example, if I am fighting, like, World Eaters, or, let's say, Hyper Thick, okay? If I can start dominating the primary game, that's, well, I guess the objective game more so than the primary game, because that could change. But the objectives, like, because they're more smaller sized armies, right? They don't have as many models, hyper thick specifically, right? I would say Thousand Suns, but, or yeah, fuck it, maybe you're in the Thousand Suns mirror. Because you are going to be playing this in a way that is putting more bodies in places, you are then going to have things like +1 to wound versus things that already don't have it. Something like Imperial Knights. I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner. Imperial Knights or Chaos Knights, right? Did you have the toughest matchup with them beforehand in Cult of Magic? Not quite, but when you go for both armies have a small amount of models within their army list, then you probably take more losses than you would want to from the smaller amount of models but bigger stats, right? You have brigands and shit shooting you across the table. It gets pretty bad for you pretty easily. Now, that's assuming when you aren't literally just fucking busted. In the one-on-one, 5 tiny guys does not traditionally beat 1 giant war dog. So, to that extent, it depends on what the metas are doing. And before you call Cap like that's never a meta that's going to happen, we actually just had a couple of weekends where the big things were kind of winning, and Astra Militarum has tanks more than they're bringing infantry spam. Sisters were bringing, their vehicles, so that's less on there. So, this could be a very, hey, if everybody else is not bringing shit, I'll bring shit for once. That's what you can do in this Thousand Suns detachment. You traditionally never do, but now you will want to. So, going forward, Rubric Marines, 10 models, 200 points. It's still expensive, but you're looking for the spam here. You're looking for the spam here. Thousand Sun Sorcerer, an option to go on it. This also will make it so that your unit can't be targeted outside of 18, which is pretty darn good when you are trying to get to places on the board. The lethal hits is cool as well. Lethal hits in combination with either reroll wounds or +1 to wound means that you are getting some wounds through. So, Thousand Sun Sorcerer, you already bringing them, but cool. Now, this is probably the thumbnail inclusion, probably. The Tzaangor Shaman. Everybody's like, well, at least it's not fucking goats. And I have news for you. This is either the Goats Detachment, or your Goats Detachment is in the Codex. So if I were you, I would be praying that this is the Goats Detachment. Like, I would be severely hoping that this is the Goats Detachment, because it would make sense. Now, while you were busy hoping that Tzaangors weren't going to be a key part, they probably can be here. Tzaangor Shaman has mutating orbs, blast, death wound, psychic. 18 inches, D6, hitting on 3, strength 9, AP 0, damage 1. While this model is leading a unit, models in that unit have the feel no pain 5 up ability. While this model is leading the unit, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, add 1 to the hit roll. +1 to hit, possibly +1 to wound, or reroll wounds for dev wounds is good. Going on to what is not a problem for most other Thousand Suns situations is ignores cover. This will free you up to use ignoring cover, if you so please, or if you just so feel like stripping it. Ignoring cover on AP 0 means that they probably still have to just take their save instead of just immediately getting something for free and eating that. But that's just for Tzaangor Shaman in mind. The other thing about the Tzaangors is that they are your most, not your most, I shouldn't say, but they are more likely to be your fighting than they are anything else in this army. And for 20 models at 130 points, that's when you use shit like a fight on death. 1 CP, plus 1, wholly within the magic, so possibly on 3s, fight on death for 20 models that have something like Tzaangor blades or chain swords, and they have pistol because they want to get into it. That's where this comes in handy. T4, save on 6, but they have an invulnerable of 6. 1 wound apiece. This means that no matter what, they will have a save. And no matter what, you can probably roll some 6s. Out of 20 dice rolls, at least, you'll probably roll some 6s, right? And for each one that gets saved, you have it for your next fight, or beyond that, you have it for a fight on death punch with pistol and shit that flamers, whatever it may be. Tzaangors, OC2, battle line, infantry, pistol. Relic hunters. At the end of your command phase, roll 1d6 for each objective marker you control that has 1 or more units from your army with this ability. For each 4-up, you gain 1 Cabal point. Huh. I want to control objective markers. A thing that I traditionally don't do. I want to control objective markers. A thing I traditionally don't do. This is your Tzaangor. This is your Tzaangor detachment. This is your Tzaangor detachment. It gives you more things for actually bringing more of them, and for 130 points. Now, they are battle line, so if that turns into you just bringing 60 Tzaangors instead of 120, yeah, sure. That way you still have whatever points that adds up to. But for most purposes, I think if you want to capitalize from the shit here, plus 1 to wound, possibly re-rolling wounds, plus 1 to hit, 5 upfield, no pain, fight on death on possibly 3s. All clues point to Tzaangors. Oh, and sticking. How could I forget? And sticking. Right, because those are 1,000 Suns units. 1,000 Shores, 1,000 Suns, excuse me. Psychers, fall back, shooting charge if you need to, but they have pistol. Not a big deal. But fallback shooting charge on a Tzaangor Shaman who has a blast, maybe, right? Maybe. Not the biggest thing, not the best use of it, but maybe you need a charge bonus somehow, some way. Um, yeah, maybe you get locked in, and instead of letting your opponent continue a fight, you fall back, shoot, and charge again. That way you get your fights first back. That could be the thing. Now, I should also say this is my hint hint Thousand Suns model only with the Noctilith Mantle. While the bearer's unit is on the battlefield, it is wholly within your army's flow of magic. Models in that unit cannot be selected to use any rituals. You're probably not using a Tzaangor Shaman to conduct a ritual. Probably not. But if it is always plus 1 to wound on, well, let's just say that bearer's unit, plus 1 to wound for a psychic attack, right? Yeah, it's already death wounds, but it blast, 18 inches, strength 9, plus 1 to hit, so on 2s for d6. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. Then we go over to the Tzaangor Enlightened, which are not battle line. They still have OC of 2, and they can be led by a shaman. They have Divining Spear, which is Lance Precision, which is where I go, maybe, maybe. Malign Trickery, once per turn, when an enemy unit ends a normal advance or fallback move within 9, you have a reactive move d6, right? This also, now it's a low model count, but this lets you explore around the board, more so for shit like sticking, because they have a 10-inch move. Also noted about Tzaangors, they have a 6-inch move, not the best, but you can reroll advance and charge rolls made for the unit. You can also reroll battle shock test if that's the case, but you know, that's that. 10-inch move, maybe sticky something. I could see you making the argument for a squad, right? Maybe one. Maybe not too many past that. Maybe one. And also, if you have, going back to Tzaangors, 20 bodies with a 5 up feel no pain, a 6 up invuln, -1 to hit because of stealth. Yeah. And if they are permanently within your flow of magic, the benefit of cover, probably don't need that part, but possible. So that just makes them annoying as fuck to lift. Because realistically, you don't really have a good reason to use it on other data sheets within the army. Going over to the one that's more probable to keep everybody's attention, Thousand Sun Sorcerer and Terminator armor. Now, everybody gets fucking Warp Smite basically within the army, so that's like where the psychic attacks are. But outside of that, you have shit like Consecrating Frame, Coruscating Flames, goodness. Anti-monster 4 up, anti-vehicle 4 up, Death Wound Psychic, 3 attacks, hitting on 3, strength 4, AP 3, damage 2. +1 to wound. You can start doing that shit to anybody. Especially when you also can have some shit like Inferno Combi weapon, right? Or your psychic attack with the Force weapon. 5 attacks, hitting on 3s. Strength 6, AP 1, damage D3. While this model is leading the unit, weapons equipped by models in that unit have lethal hits. Again, we've talked about it. Lethal hits into reroll wounds or +1 to wound. Pretty nasty. And your shooting phase, you can select one enemy unit within 18 inches of and visible to this model. To the end of the turn, each time a friendly Thousand Suns model makes an attack that targets that unit, reroll a hit roll of 1. Reroll hit rolls of 1 into lethal hits, into reroll lethals, reroll wounds for dev wounds, or +1 to wound, rapid fire. This has the other portion of play. Once you finally run up the board with all your fucking Tzaangors and taken the objectives for your flow of magic to get going, or you need some shit to be taken, that's when the Scarab Occult Terminators get to play. Once you've already, or you're making a dent, because again, they are just there to get you some objectives, to start getting your flow of magic popping, and then you are following up with the Scarab Occult Terminators because they have to deep strike anyway, and they can do a 6-inch deep strike if they are coming from off the board. Now, to the same thing, this can give you a 6-inch deep. This could give you a deep strike for Rubric Marines, which would be more battle line. Hint, hint, more OC onto these points if that's what you want to do. So there's that. Now, the Scarab Occult Terminators won't be able to do a charge, but let's talk about the Terminators themselves. Force Weapon or Prospering Kopes. 4 attacks hitting on 3s, 6-1 D3, or 3 attacks hitting on 3s, strength 5, AP 2, damage 2. They have the Terminator thing. While this unit contains one or more Psyker models, each time an attack is made against this unit, if the strength characteristic of that attack is greater than this unit's toughness characteristic, subtract 1 from the wound roll. This works in range, this works in melee. If you have been doing the range shenanigans and you are getting shit like reroll hits, lethal hits, your Terminators, probably a block of them, maybe a block or two, depending on how points, and again, depending on if you went with the Magnus route or not. They come down if they're deep strike and they just get to blasting. Maybe some ignores cover. Because when you look at that, they only have this one flamer at 12 inches, but 36 out for shit like their Hellfire Missile Wreck, AP2 damage 3, strength 10. They don't have it. +1 to wound on strength 10. Yeah, that's nice. Reroll wounds on strength 10. Also nice. So, that's only 2 per 10, right? So 4 attacks. But shit like that starts getting you damage onto it. You can already only have 2 heavy warp flamers per 10 models. Or I guess 1 per 5 is what I should say more accurately. But the rest of this shit, for this AP, you want some shit that ignores cover, or a way to get that cover ignored somehow, some way. Maybe it was the Tzaangors that stripped it, and then you just fired on it. Maybe it was this unit themselves, so they just get ignores cover and then strip it for whoever's next. That's where you're looking for something like this. You give them stealth, they get to be a pain in the ass. Fallback, shoot, and charge, they don't have pistol. So it's a 1-2 punch on this one, I believe. From what I'm seeing, I was like, man, why would you want to do this? The things that have psychic weapons to really benefit from the +1 to wound, reroll wounds, right, are going to be the characters and shits that they're going to be pretty much half of this list, right? Or kind of half this list. Most of the psychic shit goes on to Armin. Again, they both have +1 to wound. Magnus has +1 to wound. These guys, these don't. These guys. So you can't get too tied up on the just psychic attack part, because it is pretty limiting where this +1 to wound or add 1 to the wound roll starts going on, right? But when you do it, it can be an opening for the rest of the shit that you're not traditionally doing. So, meanwhile, your characters are getting +1 to wound or reroll wounds. But then you're doing shit like fighting, you are taking objectives, ignoring cover, deep striking closer, stickying. Like that's where I think they were going with this. Where yeah, you can open up some attacks with things that could be nasty, right? If you just start with Magnus, you put Magnus out. And again, hold on one second, thinking about it. Let's take this back. Okay, never mind. I was going to say, can you deep strike Magnus 6? No. But thinking about it, if you just push Magnus out, have some Tzaangors follow him, take something, push Magnus out, deep strike wherever you wanted the Tzaangors to go with the follow-up punch of the Scarab of Cult Terminators, it's something. Or maybe you need more OC, you bring the Rubric Marines. Now, there's a lot of not psychic on the infantry that isn't per se a character. And it also wasn't on kind of some other shit that I expected it to be on. But out of this list, you come to realize that it the detachment rule is a back pocket benefit. You are being told to play the game in a specific way. This is telling you how you could do that where you've never done it before. And then you go from there. If it means that your Tzaangor Shaman now can reroll wounds with Blast Dev +1 hit, well, feel no paining 20 fucking Tzaangors up the unit or up the field, that's something you might want to do. Or when she gets there, +1 to wound on strength 9 for D6 blast. Yeah, it's still 1 damage, but it's alright. Out of that attack, right? And then once you finally get into combat and get stuck in, you have the follow-up punch of the actual Tzaangors, where it might not be a lot, but 40 attacks hitting on 3s for 511. Yeah, I'd I'd start to take those odds. Something's going to get punched in the fucking face. So, and then, you know, you can roll to see if you get more Cabal points to do Cabal rituals. And I guess before I go off on this one, let's go up to the Cabal rituals. You have options of during that phase, when a save throw is failed, re-rolling the save throw for 2. Temporal Surge, select one friendly Thousand Suns unit within 18 inches of the Psyker. Unless that unit is within engagement range of one or more enemy units, it can make a normal move, can't declare a charge. This again would be the first step of like, well, if I target my shit, you could just send the Tzaangors up. Alright. Echoes from the Warp. 6 Cabal points. Use this ritual at the start of any phase. Once this phase, you can select this Psyker's unit as the target of a stratagem for free. Well, for -1 CP. I should not get ahead of myself. -1 CP. Doombolt, you know it. We all hate it. 7 Cabal points. Use this ritual. Start of your shooting phase. Select one enemy unit within 18 inches of and visible to this Psyker. They're not a part of a attached lone op supersedes this ability. Roll 1d6 on a 1, that enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. On a 2 through 5, that enemy unit suffers d3 plus 3 mortal wounds. On a 6, that enemy unit suffers d3 plus 6 mortal wounds. Throw some shit up the board. Once again, drop down with a deep strike. Doom bolt some shit because you can't charge. 6 inch, right? So, hey, this could be your play around somebody that did have lone op. Or a unit that is lone opt, whatever. Twist of Fate. 9 Cabal points. Use this ritual at the start of your shooting phase. Select one enemy unit within 18 inches of and visible to this unit. Each time a thousand such model from your army makes a ranged attack that targets that unit, improve the AP characteristic of that attack by 2, improving the AP of 2. And again, this is your army roll, right? +2 to the AP while you have stripped the cover. Yeah. That's where you want to go with this. +2 AP on a lot of these fucking weapons. After you strip the cover, could be pretty gross. Pretty gross. But yeah, this is as many bodies as you can fit in max units, probably versus MSU. If I had to look at it at first glance. Now, if you can argue that you'll just take the smallest batch of Tzaangors and Terminators, that way you can fit more points for some other shit. Maybe Maybe. I don't know how much a Mutalisk Vortex Beast gets you here. Or a Demon Prince. Or the Forge Fiend? The Forge Fiend, actually. Let's go back. Sorry. This one is a last minute think about. But the Forge Fiend. In your shooting phase, after this model shot, select one until the enemy. So starting next turn, suppressed. You might bring some shit like Forge Fiends. Because the other thing with Thousand Suns is you feel punished for not bringing more shit that gives you Cabal points. However, for 145 points, 36-inch weapons won't benefit from half of the shit, right? Last minute, think about. Yeah, you don't want a sticky. They're not a psyker. Yeah, okay. So you won't be using. Alright, that's sticky as psyker too. You won't be using any stretch on it as well. But that's still damage. Just if you need to bolster that. Let's see. Who else might be worth it? Maulafine? Heroic Intervention for 0 CP. 10-inch move. Maybe. Maybe Mauler Fiends over Forge Fiends, if I'm being honest. 3 OC, tear some shit up. Mauler Fiend Fish and Laster Tendrils. After your Tzaangors took a hit. Maybe. Maybe this starts giving you reason to outstretch into the demon vehicles of Thousand Suns. I'm not putting that bet on it as the same as I put for the other ones, but I think this is probably your go-to detachment. Sorry to say it. Oh, happy to say it, maybe. How much do you love Magnus? Did he do anything wrong? And how many goats do you own? So yeah. If you like the video, like it. Got a comment for me, comment. And until next time, peace out, my monstrosities.